Russell. Welcome.
How's it going?
Just great.
Good to see you.
It's been 20 years.
20 years.
Since we've all been in the same place at the same time, in the same galaxy. You're still working at Adobe, I know that.
Yes.
And I'm still working at Adobe. This is my 25th year at Adobe Systems. You, Steve, where are you?
In fact, you guys have all had the same job except for me. I'm at Microsoft now.
Hey, that's interesting.
I've done a bunch of startups and enterprise software and a lot of stuff.
Microsoft using a PC?
Yes,
Yes.
PC.
That's right.
The best computer.
And John, still at ILM?
Still at ILM after 24 years there. I was there for a couple of meetings for 3.0, but I think that was, and 3.0 was the last one I actually did any direct work on.
And you were working on a James Cameron film. What was it? The Abyss,
The Abyss.
right? And that was the first film to use Photoshop. And now here we are 20 years later. Avatar just came out. Another James Cameron film that uses Photoshop.
Well, Photoshop's become an integral tool in all filmmaking.
How did it all start? So we're all sitting here today because of the two of you. What made it happen? What brought it all together?
Well, from my memory at least, it's an amazing coincidence of circumstances that all came together at just the right time. I had just started at ILM, and I actually had been working there a little over a year. A few months later, that I was visiting Tom, who was a PhD candidate at the University of Michigan, and his thesis work was on vision systems, and he had written all these image processing tools. And it was actually kind of striking how similar what Tom had written was to what I'd seen on the Pixar. You know, when I got the demo of the Pixar, it seemed so exciting. It's something I really wanted to have, but it was on very expensive, exclusive hardware that no human could afford to own, no regular person. But then Tom was doing this work on his thesis on a Macintosh Plus, a computer that I had. So suddenly it seemed like, well, it's within reach that I could have a computer of my own that could do these same sorts of things.
When did the Photoshop as a format make its first debut?
You know, a large part of why I wrote Photoshop is because I really hated working on writing my PhD thesis.
John was your first beta site, your first user who's feeding you all these ideas, and then you're just doing them. He asks for something, and
well, we sort of egged each other on, as I remember, that Tom would send me a new version, and I would play around with it, and I would sort of pitch, hey, wouldn't it be great if we could do this? And his first reaction would be, oh, yeah, well, that'd be, I don't know if that's possible. That'd be really hard. And we would talk about it. Well, what if it sort of worked like that? And Tom just wouldn't let it go after that. You know, so you plant a seed, and he starts to think about it. And we'd talk a few days later, and he said, I thought of a solution to that problem. And then it would show up in the program a few days later.
So when did this project move from something I'm doing for my PhD thesis to something I'm not really doing for my PhD thesis?
Photoshop was a whole lot more fun to work on than writing my supposed real job, which was finishing my PhD. And so that was one reason why I decided never to go back. And the other reason was it sort of became totally irrelevant in my career because compared to Photoshop, nobody really cares what degrees I have behind my name anymore.
what was its name then, and how many names has it had?
The very first version, which was little more than a display and translation utility, was called Display. Shortly after that, we recognized that that's not really a good name for an application. Tom came up with Image Pro, which I have to say I love that name. And it implied exactly the right thing. It's an image processing tool, and it's aimed at professionals. So it had just the right tone. And then it had been Image Pro for, I don't know, a month or two when I was at Sejarah, and I was walking around and I saw that there was some company that was selling an image processing suite for, I think it was Apollo computers, that was called Image Pro. Oh. And so,
you didn't have the web to go research these names.
No, it's pre-internet. So Tom and I talked, and I suggested Photolab. And so it was Photolab for a little while.
How long, a month?
Oh no, it was longer than that. That was probably 2 or 3 months. And at that point I was starting to shop the product around, and I did a demo at Electronic Arts, and at the very end of the demo, the person I was doing the demo for said, "So what are you calling this thing again?" I said, "Oh, we're calling it Photolab." And he walked over to the other side of the room, he reached up and he pulled a package off a shelf, and it was Deluxe Photolab. So I called up Tom and said, all right, Photolab's taken. And the next thing I knew, Tom had renamed it Photoshop. And
Tom named it Photoshop.
Well, I was actually giving a demo to another company for because they had some technology they wanted to show me, and it turned out this technology wasn't particularly impressive or anything like that. But I gave them a demonstration of Photoshop also.
You call it Photoshop.
And I explained the issue of it was called Photolab at the time because we didn't have a new name yet. But I explained all these conflicts we had, and the person I was demoing it to made the session, well, how about Photoshop? so I said, oh, that sounds nice. Mind if I use that? He says, no problem.
I went through a bunch of name searches, and finally I went and sat down with John Warnock, CEO, one of my personal heroes, incredible computer scientist, knows printing, great human being, not a good product namer. And so John says to me, what you got to do is you have to take two different words and put them together in a way that hasn't been done before. And I think he wanted to call Adobe Illustrator Artifactory. Is that right?
Yes,
Someone told me that.
We put that on the box, as I recall.
And so, so he's thinking, and he goes, how about Imaginator? And my heart just, dropped to the floor, and I go, okay, I'll go do a trademark search on that. And thank goodness it was taken already.
You lied. I bet you lied.
So at that point I was Photoshop's actually a pretty good name. Why don't we just stick with that?
What inspired you to take it out into the world and market this?
How did it get to Adobe?
Yeah.
well, somewhat earlier than that, Tom and I got talking about, I was making the pitch that I think this has got commercial potential.
Just a little.
That wasn't entirely clear at the time.
It absolutely wasn't.
And Tom was pretty skeptical. I remember the first time I suggested that we should go commercial with it, his first reaction was, "Wow, you're crazy. Do you have any idea how much..." Tom.
Thomas, this is crazy.
"Do you have any idea how much work writing a commercial application is?" And I had no idea how much work writing a commercial application was.
I'm glad you didn't have any idea.
And no, it was a good thing. I was full of naive optimism, and my retort back was, "Hey, if you will write it, I'll figure out how to make money with this." So the pitch that we made to Supermac was that we could bundle this as a file format translation utility with Pixel Pen.
That's it, just the file.
Well, that's really, it didn't do a whole lot more than that at the time. I called Tom and said, there's real commercial interest in this. They really want to publish it. We should get more serious about it. The argument I was making is that this is an opportunity that's never going to happen again, and we have to seize it. And I went to the Seabold conference, and I went all through the trade show floor, and any company that was exhibiting there that looked like there was a potential there for, this might fit into their product line, I would approach somebody at the booth. I'd explain that I'm an independent software developer, that we're developing an image processing product that might fit in your product line, and should we talk?
But at the time that I started at Adobe, PostScript was how Adobe was making money. Page description language went into printers, and then it was the Adobe type library, which was bringing quite a bit of money, and then the applications, Illustrator and then Photoshop. So one of the memories that I have of Photoshop,
I'm glad you have memories, I don't.
was when the event at which we first introduced Photoshop, which was the AIGA conference in San Antonio in 1989. And I remember a lot of them looking at Photoshop as if, what a quaint idea, image editing on the computer. Why would anyone do that?
So there are a lot of things happening in those times, but one of the things I was curious about is, did you sense any form of competition at the time with Photoshop?
Well, not initially, because when we started working on the product, we weren't aware of anything else. We determined that if we weren't going to be the first, that we had to be the best. we wanted to make sure that after we devoted this much of our lives to it, that we didn't get killed.
Which does bring up an interesting point. The controversies of Photoshop, you know, that's been Photoshopped. The magazine covers that have been altered, the pyramids that have been moved.
Is it evil?
The Iranian missiles that have been painted in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So bad. So bad. The best thing was to watch on the web how people then recreated what the Iranians did.
That was great.
That was really beautiful. But when they did it, they knew not to duplicate the shapes of the cloudboards.
That's right. Very
And
poor
you
Photoshop
know you've hit
work.
the big time when ABC News has somebody on and they demo Photoshop and show how easy it is to use the clone tool.
So I remember you had actually David Hockney come
Yes.
down and learn Photoshop. He was smoking almost the whole time, and he had these 2 little dogs that he brought with him.
Yeah, David was interested in computers. He's, of course, a fine artist with oils and watercolors and such, and the computer really, really interested him. And so he came into the class, we scanned things, we printed things out. He was taking, it was a bit of a shame, he took some of his original paintings or photographs that he had pasted together, and was trying to recreate that collage look that now is just a filter inside of Photoshop.
Yeah.
That was our first attempt at putting the tools in the hands of really creative people, and then it just spun from there.
Right. I mean, what was really cool was that, you know, before Photoshop, people were using image processing, image editing for really just production tasks.
Yes.
And Photoshop kind of, I don't know, democratized image editing and, you know, made it available to artists.
I happen to have some props with me that I'd like to bring right in here right now. And one of these props right here. Okay, John, let's talk about filters.
Ah, yes.
In the beginning of the time, there weren't very many filters, but there was the lens flare. Tell us about the lens
So
flare.
actually, before you jump into that, let me mention that Jhon Knoll personally ruined image editing for like the first year.
Harsh.
Because he developed these filters, twirl and wave and ripple. And
Find edges. Is that yours?
No, that was
that was Tom's.
So you destroyed
He did the distortions, and 3/4 of the images I saw done in Photoshop were people with twirled faces and stuff like that.
and pinched faces.
It brings up the question, how many different companies have we spawned from Photoshop? You know, filters and actions and, you know, hardware to software, or even the photo libraries online now for bringing images in. It's enormous.
Yeah, the whole digital stock photography
Yes.
industry was really jump-started by Photoshop.
Photoshop has been sort of been in front of its time for a number of revolutions that have gone on in imaging, and we've gone this several phases now, and every time we've sort of been the market leader going into the field, and we were the obvious choice when this new technology comes along to extend our reach, and then the web came, and suddenly people had a need to make these little images to put on the web. The most recent revolution has been digital cameras.
Over the years since we shipped Photoshop 1, I've talked to innumerable people who have said, you know, thank you for Photoshop, it's changed my career. Or I have a career now because of Photoshop. And that's one of the more sort of heartwarming things to hear is people whose lives have really been transformed in a positive way by this very goofy thing we did. I think the vision for Photoshop's future is to try and finally realize the information theory violating enhance thing that they do on CSI. Where they zoom into the 2 pixels and then enhance it to read the data on the magazine.
Even in Avatar, they made that comment. Let's enhance that. And when the Photoshop team was there, they all broke into laughter. Let's enhance that.
I think, you know, the product was in the right place at the right time, but, you know, Tom, John, Adobe, you know, capitalized on, you know, the product's success and built it, and it's hard to imagine it being more successful, but it's also hard to imagine, you know, how you could have scripted that any differently to you know, have an outcome that was even better.
Which leads to the toast. Thank you so much for a wonderful 20 years.
20 years.
Of my hobby, Photoshop.